What happens when the nation's most trusted badge turns into a backstage pass for espionage, murder, and mob payoffs? From Robert Hansen's life sentence for selling America's secrets to Moscow, to Charles McGonagal's 6.5-year fall for taking cash from a Kremlin-linked oligarch, even the FBI has watched its own march to the defendant's table. Hit subscribe, like, and ring the bell so you don't miss a single twist in the Bureau's most shocking betrayals. Robert Hansen. Picture a gray February dusk at Foxstone Park, Virginia. A hunched figure slides a garbage bag beneath a footbridge and walks away, unaware he's surrounded by 300 agents with cameras trained on him. That man was Robert Philip Hansen, a counterintelligence specialist who had sworn the oath in 1976. Yet, for 22 years he fed Moscow a treasure trove of U.S. secrets, pocketing cash, diamonds, and praise from the KGB under the alias Ramon Garcia. Hansen's hidden genius was his monotony. The devout churchgoer who drove a beat-up Taurus and brown-bagged tuna fish sandwiches looked like anyone's dull neighbor. But at night, he rummaged FBI databases, photographing classified cables in his basement and encrypting them onto floppy disks. His drops were theatrical, taping a piece of medical adhesive to a park sign to tell the Russians a package awaited. The mole's undoing came from inside Moscow itself. A disgruntled SVR officer sold U.S. intelligence a file with Hansen's fingerprints on it, triggering an elaborate false promotion that moved him into a bugged office. On May 10, 2002, a judge called the betrayal breathtaking in its scope and sentenced him to life without parole. He would die 2 decades later in the supermax he helped fill. During debriefings, Hansen admitted he once set off an FBI mole hunt against another innocent agent, just to gauge how close investigators were to him. Charles F. McGonagal. From Manhattan's federal courthouse, you could feel the betrayal hanging in the December air when Judge Jennifer Reardon called former special agent in charge Charles McGonagal forward, once the Bureau's top hunter of Russian operatives, now the quarry. In a hushed gallery, prosecutors unspooled chat logs showing McGonagal secretly pitching his services to oligarch Oleg Deripaska, a Putin ally blacklisted for election meddling. In exchange for 6-figure payments routed through shell firms, the veteran G-man promised to scrub Deripaska's name from sanctions lists and even dig dirt on a rival oligarch, an assignment that would have weaponized FBI tradecraft against U.S. interests. Yet that was only Act 1. 2 months later, another gavel, this time in Washington, added 28 months for quietly pocketing $225,000 in cash from Albanian ex-intelligence officer Agron Neza while he still carried a bureau badge. The money was allegedly seed capital for a private risk consulting empire. McGonagal was blueprinting on a burner phone labeled Diplomat, discovered in his apartment after arrest. Investigators said the phone contained a draft pitch deck promising clients access to global decision-makers, the very people he should have been vetting, not courting. The hidden damage extended far beyond the balance sheet. Court filings revealed that, while the Kremlin's cash beckoned, McGonagal persuaded junior agents to open a counterintelligence case on the rival oligarch, effectively turning U.S. resources into leverage for his clandestine employer. At sentencing, he wept, calling his fall catastrophic self-inflicted harm. But the judge observed that the harm was also national, eroding faith in the very unit meant to shield America from foreign infiltration. Sealed exhibits show McGonagal quietly lobbied State Department contacts to lift Deripaska's travel ban. An irony, prosecutors noted, because he once drafted the original intelligence memo that justified the ban. His final composite sentence, 6.5 years behind bars, forfeiture of nearly $100,000 in cash, and a lifetime reminder that the Kremlin's rubles come with iron shackles. John J. Connelly Jr. Step back to Boston's neon-lit 1980s, where Special Agent John Connelly cultivated mob boss James Whitey Bulger as an informant. The quid pro quo turned Faustian. Connelly fed Bulger sealed indictments, witness names, even a glimpse at a grand jury list, in exchange for envelopes of cash and steakhouse nights out. One memo later revealed the gangster paid him $235,000 over a decade, a sum Connelly dismissed as gift money for childhood friends from Southie. The Bureau finally moved in 1999, but only after Bulger vanished on Connelly's tip, plunging the city into a 16-year fugitive manhunt. A federal jury convicted the agent in 2002 of racketeering and obstruction. He drew 10 years. Florida prosecutors then reopened the cold case murder of J executive John Callahan, slain after Connelly warned Bulger the businessman might flip. Connelly's telephone records placed him in Boston, yet jurors agreed his leak was tantamount to pulling the trigger, handing down 40 years for second-degree murder in 2008. Despite the homicide conviction, Connelly kept collecting a federal pension because the crime occurred after retirement, exploiting a loophole that has since been closed but still fuels outrage among victims' families. Paroled in 2021 for terminal cancer, Connelly returned to Massachusetts an emaciated shadow. But historians note the ripple effect. His duplicity emboldened Bulger's Winter Hill gang, indirectly tying the Bureau to 11 mob murders a Senate panel later cataloged as preventable. One victim's brother summed it up outside the courthouse. He wore an FBI shield, but he was Whitey's made man. Richard W. Miller. Long before Robert Hansen, the Bureau's first spy scandal centered on portly Los Angeles agent Richard Miller and Soviet émigré Svetlana Ogorodnikova, whose perfume and promises of $65,000 in gold bars ensnared him in 1984. An awkward surveillance trainee, he once lost a suspect by turning down the wrong alley during a practice tail. Miller nevertheless held a classified clearance to the FBI's West Coast counter-intel files. Over breakfast at a suburban Denny's, he passed Svetlana a 300-page FBI counterintelligence manual on KGB defectors, stuffing the binder into a Sears shopping bag. Arrest came days later. Agents found him alone in a motel room rehearsing Russian greetings from cue cards. Two juries deadlocked, swayed by his claim he was infiltrating the KGB on his own initiative. But a third jury convicted him in 1986. Judge David Kenyon imposed 2 life terms plus 50 years. The drama continued on appeal. When the Ninth Circuit tossed the verdict for improper polygraph testimony, newspapers blared spy walks on technicality, forcing a retrial. In 1991, Miller finally accepted a 20-year deal, but served less than 3, released in 1994, after a judge cut the term to 13 years for exemplary conduct. Declassified cables show Soviet officers considered Miller an unlikely but useful buffoon. They nicknamed him Mr. Magoo. Still, his breach prompted the Bureau's first sweeping polygraph program for agents in sensitive posts, a policy analysts credit with nabbing future insider threats. Miller died quietly in Utah in 2013, but his legacy lingers each time an agent sits before the polygraph examiner's blinking lights. Earl Edwin Pitts. On December 18, 1996, cafeteria chatter at Quantico froze as tactical teams swarmed instructor Earl Pitts, a 13-year agent admired for his classroom lectures on spy tradecraft. Hours earlier, he had slid hotel room curtains shut to receive $65,000 in cash from undercover FBI handlers posing as the SVR, a sting triggered by a defector who said Pitts had been Moscow's man since 1987. During that 5-year run, Pitts handed over the secret computerized list of every Soviet official under FBI surveillance in America, plus the name of a covert U.S. asset inside their embassy. His grievance? The Bureau. "Treated me like a dog," he fumed in a recorded drop letter asking Russian handlers for steady funding. He pleaded guilty in 1997 and drew 27 years, the harshest sentence ever negotiated for an FBI spy who cooperated. But the cooperation came with a twist. In post-plea debriefings, Pitts flagged colleague Robert Hansen as suspicious, noting Hansen's curious attempts to access classified files unrelated to his duties. The tip landed in a file cabinet. Hansen would go undetected for 4 more devastating years. Sting transcripts later revealed the Bureau used Pitts as a live-fire security test, feeding him sham requests for secrets, then tracing every keystroke as he foraged in FBI systems, exposing audit trail gaps the Bureau quietly patched. Released in 2019, Pitts lives under a new identity. Conditions of parole forbid internet use without monitoring, a modern leash the Cold War turncoat never imagined. Mark Stephen Putnam. In June 1990, the quiet Appalachian town of Pikeville, Kentucky, learned that the year-old disappearance of 27-year-old Susan Smith ended with a confession no one could script. Her handler, Special Agent Mark Putnam, walked into the county prosecutor's office and admitted he had strangled the informant, who, he said, was carrying his child, after she threatened to expose their affair. Putnam had arrived in Pikeville 3 years earlier as a fresh-minted graduate of Quantico, assigned to chase a serial bank bandit nicknamed Cat Eyes. Needing local eyes, he recruited Smith with envelopes of bureau cash. Their twice-weekly debriefings turned intimate, despite warnings from Putnam's wife, Kathy, that the headstrong informant would ruin you. On a stormy night atop Peter Creek Mountain, Smith demanded money and recognition. The argument turned physical, and Putnam's hands closed around her throat. He rolled the body into a ravine, returned to Miami, and kept working cases, until guilt gnawed so hard he called a lawyer and volunteered for prison, stunning investigators who still had no corpse. Judge William N. Wooten called the plea unprecedented and imposed 16 years for first-degree manslaughter, the first homicide conviction of an FBI agent in history. When agents exhumed Smith months later, coroners found she was indeed 4 months pregnant, but DNA testing, still primitive in 1990, was never completed. Putnam's paternity remains unproven lore in Pike County bars. Babak Bumand. Between 2015 and 2018, veteran counterterrorism agent Babak Bumand lived a double life worthy of a crime boss consigliere. Private jet hops to Las Vegas, $10,000 a night suites at the Bellagio, and escort services charged to a fixer linked to Armenian organized crime. In return, Bumand ran suspects' names through sensitive FBI and Treasury databases, tipping an oil fraud kingpin off to surveillance, and even telling him to avoid Dubai after spotting a red flag warrant. The Bureau finally struck in 2020, after wiretaps captured Bumand promising to make cases disappear for $30,000 a month. A Los Angeles jury convicted him of bribery and money laundering. In February 2023, Judge R. Gary Klausner called the breach a wholesale sale of your badge and handed down 6 years plus $150,000 of forfeiture. Trial exhibits showed Bumand saved his illicit contact in his iPhone under the emoji unicorn. Because the money felt mythical, prosecutors quoted him as bragging in a text. Terry J. Albury. Assigned to Minneapolis as the field office's only black agent, Terry Albury said he watched Muslim immigrants swept into sting operations for statistics, not safety. From 2016 to 17, he quietly photographed 70 internal documents, including secret rules for cultivating informants, then funneled them through encrypted email to The Intercept. When auditors traced file access to his laptop, Albury cooperated, admitting he hoped to spark reform, not profit. But prosecutors argued the leak risked undercover lives, and in October 2018, Judge Wilhelmina Wright imposed 48 months, the second longest sentence ever in a media leak case. Court records reveal Albury once drafted a formal bias complaint inside the bureau, but deleted it after a mentor warned, "They'll sideline you to records duty." That email chain, recovered by forensics, became a defense exhibit but was sealed to protect personnel privacy. Scott M. Bowman. In 2014, Special Agent Scott Bowman led Los Angeles raids netting stacks of cartel cash. Instead of entering $136,462 into evidence, he stuffed it into a gym bag, buying a $43,000 Mustang, $27,000 Dodge Challenger rims, high-end audio gear, and even $15,000 worth of cosmetic surgery for his wife. To hide the theft, he forged a local detective's signature on deposit slips and emailed the officer a script if anyone asks. Investigators grew suspicious when Bowman showed up at headquarters in designer suits and bragged about new wheels on social media. Arrested in 2015, he pled guilty to conversion of property, obstruction, falsifying records, and witness tampering. Judge Jesus Bernal called the conduct brazen greed draped in federal authority, sentencing him to 36 months and ordering full restitution. The FBI's Office of Professional Responsibility later told Congress that Bowman's case prompted the agency to begin photographing all seized currency beside serial number logs, a policy now nicknamed the Bowman Protocol. Matthew T. Lowry, rising star Matt Lowry, once briefed the D.C. U.S. Attorney on cartel pipelines. By 2014, he was nodding off in his government Ford after shooting heroin siphoned from evidence bags stored in the trunk. Lowry, addicted to opioids prescribed for ulcerative colitis pain, began swapping seized heroin for protein powder, then backdated chain of custody logs to mask weight losses. His collapse came when fellow agents found him unconscious with a spoon and badge on the passenger seat. The fallout was seismic. 28 federal drug cases dismissed, traffickers released, and thousands of man-hours voided. Judge Thomas F. Hogan balanced addiction against damage, imposing 36 months and a $15,000 fine, noting Lowry wounded the justice system he swore to uphold. A sealed sentencing memo revealed Lowry filed, but never sent, a request for inpatient rehab 6 months before his arrest. Supervisors had praised his relentless work ethic and doubled his caseload, unknowingly feeding the cycle that fueled his theft. Each downfall began with a small permission, an affair nobody would find out about, a side deal too lucrative to refuse, a document only the public should see, a handful of cash just this once, or a secret relapse hidden by a badge. 5 slips became felonies, 18 cumulative years of scandal headlines, hundreds of compromised cases, and most corrosive, fresh doubts about the nation's premier investigative force. Postmortems produced fixes, mandatory polygraphs for counterintel roles after Miller, enhanced financial disclosure triggers after Hansen and McGonagal, hotline whistleblower routes after Albury, serial number photo logs after Bowman, and surprise evidence audits after Lowry. Yet every reform starts with the same fragile constant, personal integrity. "We can wire the vault shut," an inspector general once testified, "but if the guard wants to open the door, he still has the key." So the saga ends where it began, with a question to the audience. What would you do with that key when nobody is watching? stay vigilant, stay curious. And if you found this journey eye-opening, hit subscribe so we can keep unmasking the stories hidden behind the seals.